He had to admit he was well matched. From the timed and strategically placed blows and the strength behind each hit, Luca concluded that his opponent wasn't some lousy crook hired for easy money. He was well trained, but Luca had to end things quickly. This guy wasn't alone in this heist. He had a partner, and his partner had what Luca had been waiting months to get his hands on. He succeeded in knocking his opponent unconscious, the fairly slender man falling limp in the dark alleyway. Luca imagined the look of surprise on the thief's masked face when he unexpectedly sent a blow to his jaw. He didn't wait to see if he'd get up again, searching keenly for where the other thief might have gone. A small voice nudged him to take to the roof of the many buildings surrounding him, and it took no time for him to oblige. Just as he reached the top, a deep voice sounded in his earpiece. "He's on the roof!" Luca didn't bother asking which one, instead following the drone suspended in the air. It watched him as he soared through the sky, effortlessly landing atop a new roof in mere seconds. Although it was dark, Luca trained his eyes on any moving figure. Just then, the clouds separated, allowing a stream of moonlight to bathe the area surrounding him. He took advantage of it and caught sight of a figure dashing across the rooftops almost as effortlessly as he was. Luca solely focused on his determination to reach the thief before he could get away, letting his speed increase with each steady breath he took. He caught up to the thief, only behind him by a hair, and used his momentum to tackle him mid-air. They tumbled onto another rooftop with a hard thud, rolling a few times before Luca overpowered him. He straddled the thief, twisting his arm at an awkward angle. The thief let out an odd-pitched groan as he writhed in pain, but Luca was only focused on retrieving the stolen item. He reached into the man's satchel, pulling out the ring that cost more than any other heirloom in his possession. The ring was passed down throughout the centuries, made from the rarest and most expensive gemstones known to man. He pocketed the ring and finally turned his attention to his less worthy opponent. Unlike the man he faced before, thief number 1, this guy was too easy to overtake. His form was lacking in strong muscles, which Luca had plenty of, and his fighting technique was poor. Maybe this guy was the hired crook looking for easy money. Luca's mouth pulled into his signature cocky grin as he prepared to form some kind of insult, but he faltered at the sound of the man's agony. It was too high-pitched. His brows furrowed as he examined the man to the best of his ability in the late night. Now that he noticed, the man's wrists were too small. They fit easily into his large hand. He shook his head. Maybe he was young. He tried to settle on that answer and leave since he had what he came for, but curiosity got the best of him. Shifting his weight from where he still straddled him, Luca's grip on his wrists tightened as he used his other hand to slowly peel the mask off the thief's face. His opponent only gave a weak sound of protest before his identity was revealed. Luca failed to conceal his surprise at the feminine face staring back at him. Her eyes were a captivating hue of hazel, even as they shone with an unspeakable fury directed at him. The moonlight brought out the deep tone of her skin, the unmistakable beauty of her features. He was momentarily stunned by the specimen beneath him, but a moment was all she needed. Luca's unintentionally loosened grip gave her an easy escape from under him, and she was on her feet impressively fast. He couldn't speak as she kicked him in his chest with unexpected force, knocking the wind out of his lungs. Before she kicked him in his chest, however, she turned her back on him, lifted her leg, and swung it back to connect with his jaw with bone-shattering force. His back heavily hit the surface of the roof, his head receiving the brunt of the impact as it bounced off it. Stabbing pain shot through his skull immediately, sending bursts of white light into his vision. Before he completely lost consciousness, he saw the woman approach him, kicking him onto his side and snatching the ring from his pocket. She turned in the opposite direction and ran, giving him the perfect view of her retreating form. As her figure grew smaller and smaller, Luca must have imagined seeing her look back for a split second before disappearing off the side of the roof. Luca gasped awake as frigid water slapped him in the face. He coughed and gagged as it infiltrated his nose. Everything burned, including his jaw and head, but that didn't explain why his hands were bound. He opened heavy eyes to a familiar scene, and his dark eyebrows creased in confusion. It only took a few seconds for him to realize where he was, and a few more to notice two pairs of eyes fixated on him, each expressing something different. He decided to address the green pair. "Why am I tied up?" Luca groggily asked, his throat scratchy like sandpaper. The stormy-eyed man beside the green-eyed man gave him an accusatory glare, urging him to answer the question. The green-eyed one simply shrugged, a sly smirk lifting his lips. "What? Aw, come on. Give me one time when there was an open opportunity to tie up Luca Romano." He seemed to be waiting for an answer, but when he received none, his smile grew. "Exactly." Luca growled at him, shaking his head at the blockhead he unfortunately called partner. Seeing as Luca wasn't the slightest bit amused, he raised his hands innocently, advancing to untie him. Another growl from Luca made him go still. The ropes tightly secured around Luca's wrists dropped to the ground in a heap, and Luca stood to his full height, cracking the bones in his aching body. When he cracked his neck, he immediately regretted it. Excruciating pain traveled from his jaw to the back of his head, sending out throbbing jolts every few seconds. He steadied himself on the same chair he was just tied to. When he recovered, he walked the short distance to the mini-fridge located in the corner of the room, pulling out a cold bottle of water. He contemplated placing the icy plastic to his jaw, but his dry mouth protested the loudest. He finished the bottle quickly and crushed it in his hand. He felt eyes on him the whole time. "What?" he snapped, whirling on them and immediately regretting it. The gray-eyed one, Leo, said in his always serious voice, "Did you get it?" Luca knew he was referring to the heirloom, and anger poured on him like molten lava. He caught himself before he could clench his jaw. He instead muttered no. "Well, what happened? You were right there!" The blockhead, Danny, exclaimed, his thick eyebrows raised. "I could ask you two the same," he retorted darkly, fixing them with accusatory glares. Leo stepped forward, his giant form challenging Luca's fairly tall form. In terms of size, Leo won in that area. "Do you think those two thugs were the only ones after the heirloom last night, Luca? I had my hands full. And I tried to keep an eye on you, but you were too fast," Danny added as if he were completely justified. "By the time I found you, you were knocked out and the guy was gone." Luca's hand lightly touched his jaw at the reminder of the fight he lost last night. Never had he been knocked unconscious by an opponent before. "Did he do that to you?" Leo nodded at Luca's jaw, his own strong jaw clenched, and his thick brows pulled into a frown. Luca figured it must have looked bad. "She," he blurted without thinking. The silence that followed made him dread gauging their reactions. Danny's eyebrows nearly reached his hairline, and his mouth took on the perfect shape of an O. Leo's expression was unreadable, aside from the crease between his brow. Danny released an unsettling snort, bursting into hysterical laughter. He bent as his arms circled his stomach, his body shaking as he wheezed. He tried to reach up and pat Leo's shoulder, but Leo sidestepped him, his expression never changing. At the sound of Danny's mocking laughter, Luca wanted to trade places with him and have him kicked in the jaw more than ever. But after his laughter ceased, he wiped a stray tear from his face and straightened. "Sorry, Luke." Another laugh broke through. "But you said a girl did that to you?" "A woman," Luca corrected through carefully gritted teeth. "And she caught me off guard." As usual, Danny read deeper into things than normal. "Was she hot? Is that why you were distracted?" When Luca looked away, glaring at the ground to stop himself from punching him, he said in a smug tone, "Ooh, wait until your pops finds out. He's gonna kick your—" A slap from Leo quieted him. "Shut up, Danny." Luca left Leo and Danny to bicker, taking his leave for a much-needed shower. He walked through the oddly long hallway with labored movement, feeling a pound in his skull with each step he took. He eventually made it to the bathroom, avoiding the ugly bruise he knew awaited him in the mirror and stepping into the steaming shower. He scrubbed his tattooed arms, imagining the skin beneath the ink being red from the amount of force he was using. But no matter how much scrubbing he did, he couldn't seem to erase the image of that ruthless woman from his mind. Donning an A-shirt, he rejoined Leo and Danny. They both looked up upon his entrance but said nothing, which he somewhat appreciated. But of course, that was short-lived as Danny opened his big mouth. "Are you gonna tell your pops tonight?" Luca paused, raising an eyebrow. "Why would I do that?" Danny and Leo exchanged a look, one Luca wasn't too fond of before Leo took the initiative. "He's hosting a dinner tonight at the manor, did you forget?" With the look on Luca's face, it was evident he forgot, but would he say to his dad tonight? "Hey, Pops, I had the heirloom in my grasp and lost it again to the same thief." But get this, the he was actually a she, and she managed to knock me out. And then they'd have a grand old laugh about it. Luca grimaced, imagining the look of utter disappointment on his dad's face. There was no way he'd be able to tell him that, but lying would only make things worse. He knew his dad would ask. He always did a checkup with the new leader of the Ladri de Ladri, and up until now, Luca had never given a bad report. Maybe that would save him this time. This time. There was nothing else he could do but tell the truth. "So, what are you gonna do about that?" Danny pointed at Luca's jaw, not daring to get near enough to touch it. The night progressed, drawing nearer to the time Luca, Leo, and Danny would have to depart from their hideout and join the other men at his father's manor. The sight of a group of large men casually seated around the round table still unnerved Luca even after years. He managed to conceal it well, plastering a look of indifference on his face. Dinner was soon served, and the men ate with the low buzz of conversation. Unfortunately, Luca couldn't sit near Danny and Leo. Not that he cared to be by Danny after his irritating mockery earlier, since he had to sit on the right side of his father at the very head of the table. Enzo Romano, although 58 and shorter in size, demanded attention with his appearance alone. He wasn't unique in looks, aside from the white scar traveling down the length of the left side of his face, just scarcely missing his eye. But he gave off an authority even Luca failed to understand. The man had been in this line of business since he was 15 and hadn't stopped since. Unlike Luca, Enzo didn't inherit Ladri de Ladri. He built it with his own 2 hands. Every ounce of respect he had from the men present was earned by his lonesome. Enzo was a man of few words, making each one precious and worth every drop of attention. That's why when Enzo raised his glass of wine, the room grew quiet before he could utter a single word. His sharp, midnight blue eyes were centered ahead, unmoving as he said in his thick Italian accent, "A toast, men." He then shifted his eyes to Luca, and Luca felt his pulse quicken. "To my son and his team, for the retrieval of the heirloom from the daughter of Spain. We've had our eyes on this ring for years, and now my son has further proved his worth." He raised his glass higher, and the other men followed suit. Luca tried not to show his discomfort and raised his glass as well. "To the Ladri di Ladri, the thieves of thieves." Each man echoed Enzo Romano's words, resuming their conversations as dinner came close to an end. Luca dug into his steak, hoping his dad wouldn't send everyone away to have their usual check-in. Luca's hope was devoured like the steak on the men's plates as his dad cleared his throat. "Men, leave us." The room was cleared in seconds, leaving Enzo and Luca completely alone. Luca stood to try and breathe easier, but his muscles were overly tense. From the corner of his eye, he watched his dad light a cigar, taking an unhealthy puff before blowing a thick cloud into the air. "Relax, son, you look tense." Enzo offered Luca a puff, to which Luca declined before saying, "You got us the heirloom of the daughter of Spain. The hard part's out of the way. Now all you have to do is sit back and watch us get rich." "About that, Pops," Luca interrupted, scratching the back of his neck. He didn't wait for a response, although the sudden silence that fell over them was bad enough. "I don't have it." "We don't have it," He risked a glance at Enzo, the color draining from his face at the murderous look in his dad's eyes. "Then who does?" he asked darkly. Luca swallowed hard to prevent his stutter from the past from returning, instead squaring his shoulders. "The thieves got away. They still have it." His dad cursed under his breath, killing the fire from his cigar and standing to his feet. His short stature did nothing to deter his intimidation. "Did you at least see their faces?" "No," Luca lied, hoping his dad wouldn't see through it. He quickly added, "But we can get it back. I can get it back. I just need—" "Luca," Enzo said his name in a way that had him reeling. He felt his dad move toward him, but he kept walking until he was facing the wide window overlooking the manor garden. "What is one of my most important rules?" Knowing where this was going, Luca had no choice but to play along. It was the only way to keep his dad calm. "Don't let the enemy get away." Precisely. His tone was frigid, his muscles tensing beneath his black blazer. "I need not remind you of how I lost your mother, do I?" Luca learned by now that whether he answered yes or no didn't matter. A story was bound to come. "I was a young fool, hungry for influence. Some bozo owed me money, a good chunk, but I decided to play cool guy. I let him get roughed up a bit and let him go. Little did I know, he was out for blood." His fists clenched so hard that the usual wheat color of his skin had drained completely. "By the time I got to your mother, it was too late. He tried to leave after giving me a little gift, but a smart man only needs to make a mistake once to know not to make it again." He flashed his scar at Luca, silently reminding him of the gruesome night he was too young to recall. Thankfully, Luca, Enzo's only heir, was put into hiding. Enzo found him shortly after, claiming it was a miracle he lived, but Luca heard the opposite in a whispered story years before. Luca knew if Enzo had the chance to turn back time, he would have saved his wife instead of his son. Luca learned not to dwell on it, numbing the ache that usually followed the tough truth. "Son," Enzo had turned to him, stilling him in his spot with a stern gaze. "I need you to get that heirloom back. No matter what it takes, we can't afford to let it get into the wrong hands." Luca could have laughed at the irony of that statement, considering they were the wrong hands, but he gave a solemn nod. He'd get the heirloom back if it were the last thing he did, no matter what it took. "Don't let me down, son. I'm counting on you," Enzo added before he could leave. It was as clear as day that those words were meant to threaten instead of encourage, but Luca knew by now. By the time Luca arrived at his apartment, showered, and lay in bed, his thoughts were still running at high speed. No matter what it takes. Even death, Luca added what had blatantly been implied. Releasing a sigh, Luca rolled to his side, reaching into his bedside desk and retrieving a thick book. He simply stared at it for a long moment, wondering how he ended up here, how he ended up reading the book that openly disagreed with basically everything he lived for. He scoffed. A sinner reading the Bible? What made him worthy?
The simple answer was that absolutely nothing made him worthy, but he just couldn't seem to stop reading. It was as if there was an insatiable hunger and thirst deep within his being that was only quenched when he opened the Bible, or, as of recently, prayed. He didn't feel worthy, yet Jesus' gift made him worthy. Him, the leader of Ladri di Ladri. He could barely believe it, but it was taught every other Sunday by the pastor of a local church.
He seemed to preach it as if he was singling Luca out, and Luca didn't like that. Not one bit. But that didn't stop him from opening the Bible and reading each chapter like a starving man finally being granted a morsel of bread. Luca craved the presence of God more than life itself, yet something always held him back. His life. If God truly wanted Luca to repent and follow his perfect way, why didn't he just get him out of the situation he was so deeply embedded in? Why didn't he make a way for him to escape? Even then, Luca still followed, hearing a small voice tell him to hold on and see what the end would hold for him, to anticipate the light at the end of the tunnel, so he agreed to do so, if only to see what his life could possibly be outside of this. even if death was his only reward. This was the secret Luca would take to the grave if he had to. No one would find out. A week had passed since Enzo's dinner, and Luca's jaw was gradually healing. Now only a faint purple bruise marked his jaw, and his head didn't pound much at all. The shrill ring of Luca's cell phone had him cease his light probing of the tender bruise, answering without checking the caller ID. "Get here now!" It was Leo. Luca tensed, already halfway out the door. "What is it?" "We have the heirloom,"